And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious, close, but victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, the Indiana Hoosiers prevail over the Penn State Nittany Lions 76-73. It was yet another season when the Hoosiers had a 10, 11-point lead midway there through the second half, and Penn State was able to chip away and get back at it. You know, I was thinking to myself when Indiana was up 4 or 5 with a couple minutes left that the coolest guy in the arena is probably Pat Chambers thinking, what, only 4 or 5 points we have to come back this year? But somehow, some way, Indiana was able to hang on for the victory. And, you know, to be honest, when a team has beaten you 3 out of the last 5 times in your home gym, as Penn State has done to Indiana, you take the wins as they come. So I know people will be upset that the win wasn't by more and that Indiana let Penn State get back in it and yada, yada, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, Indiana's 3-1 in the conference. They took care of a conference win at home that they needed to take care of against a team that they should beat. And, you know, I saw some people saying survive and advance on Twitter. In the Big Ten this year, it is a little bit of survive and advance, and that's exactly what Indiana did, winning 76-73. We will break it all down for you tonight. We've got our full lineup. I am live from Scottsdale, Arizona. As you can see, my background is a little bit different. But, you know, going on a work trip, that doesn't prevent me from being here for IU games. We've got Andy Bottoms. We've got Ryan Phillips. So we're going to break down this IU victory for you this evening. If you have questions, tweet them. The hashtag is Assembly Call. You know that. You can also go to the YouTube page and leave us your comments there. So let's start out tonight's show as we always do, going around the horn. We'll start out with the banner moment. And my banner moment actually came about midway through the second half, and it's when Indiana and Penn State were tied at 51. If you remember, the game was tied at 51 actually at the under 12-minute timeout. It had been very back and forth. Indiana wasn't getting much production from the bench. At that point in the game, it was just kind of a meh, blah game. The fans weren't really into it. There wasn't much going on. But I thought that point in the game was when Indiana really had their best stretch of play. And there was a key 7-0 run by IU when they took it from 51-51 to 58-51. And what I loved about this run was it was a short spurt of Troy Williams being a superstar and his supporting teammates doing supporting things. And what I mean by that is, you know, Troy ended up, he had, I think, 4 points over that stretch. And two of the buckets were actually created by offensive rebounds from Ryan Burton. And Troy also had an assist for a three-pointer. It was a big three by Colin Hartman off the assist by Troy where he drove and kicked it out to Hartman. And I just thought it was a terrific stretch for Indiana where Troy Williams really asserted himself as this team's, you know, most dominant player, which he can be on offense when he's playing like that. And then, you know, you had a guy like Ryan Burton come in where a lot of the bench guys are struggling. Emmett Holt is struggling, and he provided energy when Indiana needed it. The bench has been so important for this team this year, and I thought Ryan Burton was the guy tonight who really gave them that energy off the bench. But it was a really key stretch for IU. Put them up 58-51. They eventually extended that out to 64-53. It might have even gotten a little bit bigger than that before Penn State chipped away. But I thought that run was where Indiana separated themselves and ultimately won the game because obviously they needed all of those points to hold off the last charge from Penn State. But I thought a really nice job by Troy Williams of leading his team when they needed someone to step up and the other guys stepping up and doing the little things you need to do to win, diving for a loose ball like Ryan Burton did when he set up that James Blackman three late. Those are the kind of plays that you need to win games like this. Indiana got them tonight, and again, that's why they survive in advance, to use that phrase again. So that was my banner moment. Let's go around the horn now with the guys and get their opening thoughts on this game. Andy, we'll start with you. Your bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
I mean, a lot of guys for me that I feel like could talk about, but I'll talk Robert Johnson here. I thought he was really from the get-go. I feel like you can get a pretty good feel for what you're going to get from him early in the game. If he sees a couple shots go down early, then that tends to help him out. And he got out of the gate strong tonight. Ended up with 20 points. Hit some big threes over the course of the game, and really just thought he played well. And I think I'm not sure which of you was manning the Assembly Call Twitter account at the time, but I know one of you talked about him kind of showing signs of getting through that freshman wall and breaking through. I thought he was really good tonight throughout, and it feels like some of these Penn State games over the years have had some kind of unlikely breakout scorers. I know Matt Roth had a big game against them. I feel like there are another couple that come to mind that are
Roderick
the players.
Wilmot, baby.
Yeah, well, he did have a tendency to get hot from time to time. That one did come to mind, but feels like in some of these games, there's always a somewhat unlikely guy who hits a number of threes and scores 20 points, and that I guess it was his turn to do that tonight. So I thought he played really well and was one of the guys who, at least offensively, on a night when Yogi was held to single digits again. James Blackman was had stretches but was a little bit hit and miss. I thought he was one of the stabilizing factors on offense where he found ways to get some solid buckets.
And Ryan, your rant on tonight's IU victory.
Yeah, I thought the difference in the game was IU's aggressiveness, just in general. I thought, they struggled on the boards, and I thought there was a lot of pushing and shoving going on underneath, and there was. The fouls wound up being fairly even, which is all you can really hope for from Big Ten officials, but I thought there was some over-the-back stuff going on. But I think with the narrative going into the game that IU was undersized, I think that the officials kind of let that go because they just assumed, well, they're just not tall, so guys are going to get rebounds over them. I thought they actually did a good job blocking out from time, at some times, and then the ball just didn't bounce their way. But I thought offensively, the aggressiveness, and I thought Robert Johnson was really a key for that. It seemed like he'd been settling for threes for a while and just not playing with a lot of confidence. And then he just was in attack mode tonight from the tip. And he didn't score very much in the second half, but I just thought he was so key in the first half, kept the team moving and attacking the middle of that defense. And we know that's the key with this team. With guys who can shoot, you have to attack the middle of the key, in the middle of the paint. You get the ball in there, you can find open shooters, and that's just, or you can go finish it. And that's how you win in college basketball. Is you have to attack. You can't just sit back and wait for open shots. And I thought and then of course Stanford Robinson had a great game. I thought 6 of 6 from the free throw line, moving back to left-handed, 3 of 6 from the field, but he just had a couple of great finishes. And it was a big game for him, and really a bounce back game. And it looked like switching hands has really flipped the confidence switch back on for him. And he wanted the ball and he was attacking. We even got him isolated on the block a few times, and I'd really like to see more of that because with his length, if he's got a guard defending him, he could definitely do some damage down there, and that'd be another way to get some points while Perea is out. So. I thought it was a really good performance in stretches. Obviously, they've still got to learn to close games out, but with getting that emotional blow of losing Perea today, not just from a physical standpoint that we don't have our tallest, active player, but we also, you lose a teammate for a month, and now you're thinking, well, do we have a chance to do that? Blah blah blah. They rebounded. Didn't have a huge letdown from the Ohio State game and finished the game off, and a win's a win at this point in the Big Ten. Rutgers beat Wisconsin the other night, so.
And that's why I would caution anybody about feeling upset at the 3-point victory. You're coming off a big win, so there's a chance for a letdown right there. You don't have a real active crowd for most of this game. You do have the emotional letdown of Hunter getting hurt, like you said. There are actually a lot of reasons why I could see us coming on here after the game, and plus you have a team that's not afraid of Assembly Hall because they've won in here 3 out of the last 5 times they've come, so you don't have that psychological edge. So for a lot of reasons, this is a game that could have turned into a loss pretty easily. And yes, fortunately there weren't 0.5 more seconds on the clock, so that last 3 didn't count. But sometimes you need those victories in the Big Ten season. Indiana got one. So I think to me, sometimes you can look at a game like this where the energy's, the team's kind of lethargic. It's not the greatest of performances, and you can be disappointed because I think everybody was hoping for a 10, 12-point victory. I'm not buying that tonight. Frankly, I walk away from this game a little bit with kind of that, we got out of here with a win feeling, but I'm not that disappointed with that. A win is a win. Let's take it. Let's move on. And overall, when you look at these first 4 games of the Big Ten season, it's an unequivocal success for Indiana, even considering the loss at Michigan State, which was really bad, but they took care of business in the other game. So a lot of positives there. Stan Robinson, Bill Simmons has what he calls the Tyson zone. I kind of feel like there should be a Stan Robinson zone. This guy has basically single-handedly won a game for us against Wisconsin, comes out tonight, switches back to lefty free throw shooting, goes 6 of 6. You kind of just, whatever he does, good or bad, I kind of would say, yeah, I can see that. You tell me that he scores 20 points and we win, yeah, I can see that. Tonight he didn't score 20, he had 12, But, Stan came into this game. Let me pull up the numbers here. He's using 29% of Indiana's possessions when he's on the floor coming into the game, which is by far the most. And his O rating is 80.5, which is at least 25 points lower than the next highest guy on the team. So when he's on the floor, he's using a lot of possessions. And tonight he played 17 minutes. So we need that kind of efficiency out of him because he uses the so many possessions, and we got it tonight. So that was obviously a big key. Now let's talk about the other big story, which is Emmett Holt. I think a lot of people were interested to see what he was going to bring tonight with Hunter Perea out. There was a lot of speculation that he might start. Colin Hartman was the guy who ended up getting the start. And I think, by all accounts, a disappointing performance from Emmett Holt. He only played 13 minutes. He had 1 point, 1 assist, did not grab a rebound, had a steal. And I thought, Andy, I want to go to you on this. I thought Emmett's number one, his most important attribute has been being in the right place at the right time and being active. And I didn't think he brought that tonight. I thought he was a step slow, mentally and physically. And whether that's, the pressure of kind of this newfound role, just the ups and downs of a freshman, I don't know what it is. But the positives he usually brings, they just weren't there tonight. And maybe we just have to get used to that with him because he is a freshman. What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought it was odd, and I'll be curious to look at some of the lineup stuff to see if he really played for too many lengthy stretches, because it didn't feel that way. I know a couple times in the first half I kind of questioned whether he was in. I checked to see if he had gotten in foul trouble or something. It just, even early on, his usage didn't make a ton of sense to me. The numbers would suggest that was warranted to a certain extent because he really wasn't making a whole lot happen. So I thought he was active in stretches, but there were other times when you really didn't know he was on the floor. I think a couple times defensively he kind of got caught in no man's land where, as it seems like happens, a couple times a game, it seemed like some guys playing zone, some playing man, he would back off a guy and let him shoot. But even things as simple as some of the blockouts, I thought he's been a guy who fairly consistently has shown really good fundamentals in terms of really turning and getting into guys. And I didn't see that tonight. The rebounding numbers are pretty ugly at one point. It closed up a little bit, at least according to the ESPN box score. It was 37-30, but IU gives up 13 offensive rebounds, about a third of the misses from Penn State, a little bit over a third they got, and I thought that was at least one place. I don't know that everybody expects him to come out and score even 6, 8, 10 points a game. But I think the one thing it felt like we were able to rely on him for was, rebounding and some of the positioning things that you talked about. For whatever reason, whether he was banged up or whatever it was, he never really seemed to get into the flow of the game. So he, played with some effort in spurts, but was definitely, if you had told me that he was only going to play 13 minutes tonight after the news of Perea, I would have assumed that he'd gotten himself in foul trouble, which really wasn't the case.
And Ryan, what about Colin Hartman? Colin got the start tonight. And personally, I thought it was a really uneven performance from him. He had 8 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, so he was out there doing Colin Hartman things, but he was also out there doing things Colin Hartman doesn't normally do. 3 turnovers, he picked up 4 fouls, played 23 minutes, so that's not a crazy amount more than he normally plays. But he also stepped up and hit big threes, made some timely plays too. So I thought he tried to do a little bit too much at times, maybe feeling the weight of a little extra responsibility, so it's kind of understandable. But, ultimately he hit a huge 3 that helped seal the deal for Indiana. But overall, not quite the efficient, mistake-free basketball we're used to seeing from him.
No, and I think that the foul trouble really limited him a little bit, especially in the first half. I think that with both he and Emmett, they were taking on a new role. Hartman has been the energy guy off the bench, sort of that old role that Will Sheehy used to have. I mean, they're completely different types of players, but it's, hey, just come in and make stuff happen and be shot out of a cannon and go get the ball and be around the ball and stuff. And tonight he had more responsibility in the offense. You saw him setting a lot more screens, had a lot of, he was starting low in the post more than on the perimeter. And then Emmett Holt, I just felt like I think he was overthinking things. I really do. I think that he's at his best when he just sort of lets things naturally flow. And I think that maybe he sort of got caught up in the, hey, now it's your opportunity. You're the guy now with Hunter out. And I think that maybe he just needs to take a step back and just continue to do the things he does. We don't need him to be someone completely different or this big guy who's going to log 30 minutes. We just need him to continue doing what he was doing to be successful, and maybe they'll increase his minutes 3 to 5 minutes or something like that, instead of having it be, okay, now you're going to play 30 minutes. So I think that both guys just kind of need to dial it back down and do what they were doing before, and not expect that their roles are going to change in any perceptible way. They're just going to be playing more in the same roles.
Andy, you wanted to jump in on Hartman.
Yeah, I think the one thing that becomes interesting when you look at a guy like Hartman, we've talked about this before this season, and it feels like kind of his sweet spot for minutes is in that 16 to 18 range, and so you start upping that, and can he provide the same level that he's been providing those 16 to 18 minutes over 25, 28? And I don't, that remains to be seen. I'm not making my mind up after one game tonight, and he still, as you said, made some good plays, but I noticed what Ryan said as well, where he started out in the post sometimes, and to me, that's just not, he doesn't need to change, and nor should the team scheme to change the things that he does well, and put him in positions where he's not going to be able to be as successful, where, we've not seen him do anything in the post at any point. I wouldn't expect him to be there, and I think, the one thing that you really want to get when you're playing a smaller lineup with a guy like him who can hit threes is use him to space the floor and drag the other team's big guy away from the rim. So depending on what they do, whether that was just something they did tonight, whether that's something we'll see, I think that's at least what I'll be watching is, can he give them the same kinds of things over extended minutes, or is it really a case of, he's so well suited for that role that he's been taking on, asking him to do other things, does that kind of inhibit his ability to provide the same things he's been so far? Time will tell. It's too early to say after one game, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think, let me jump back in. I think that part of the reason that Hartman was starting down in the post wasn't because we expect to throw the ball into him or anything. It's because that's just the way the offensive sets are set up, is to have a post guy who goes out there and screens. And let's remember, the Honor news broke this morning. It wasn't like this has been this way since the Ohio State game or anything. This is a late-breaking thing. They had to really just kind of plug and play, and I'm sure they'll work on some different sets. But if you don't have that guy down in the post, then you've got 5 guys out on the perimeter, because unless you're going to throw Troy down on the block, or as we saw some tonight, Stan consistently, you're going to have 5 guys on the perimeter, and really that is much easier to guard than having 4 out, 1 in, and a guy coming up and screening and rolling to the hoop and stuff. So I don't think they're expecting Hartman to go down there and bang in the post and throw around post moves. That'd be fun to watch, but I don't think they're going to do it. So I think that it's just it's one of those things where they're going to have to adjust what they're doing and how they're doing it. But this was really short notice, and they just kind of threw it together and let's get the win and move on kind of thing.
Let's talk about Yogi Ferrell real quick, because I read an article today, ESPN, I think it was John Gassaway had his top 25 players in the country, and he didn't have Yogi on it, which I wasn't sure if Yogi was going to be on it or not, but it kind of upset me that D'Angelo Russell and Melo Trimble were on it over Yogi Ferrell. And maybe we can debate that. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but personally, I'll take Yogi over either one of those guys. I think it's a little bit of kind of the shiny object syndrome, where it's like, oh, this guy's new, and we forget how good the guy is that we've been watching play for the last couple of years. And part of it is, I think, Yogi's offensive numbers a little bit, they don't pop quite as much right now. And I think part of the value he's providing, it's harder to see. And a lot of it's coming on the defensive end of the floor. Tonight we had another case harassed into a relatively difficult night. DJ Newbill scored 10 points in the first half, only 2 in the second half. 12 points, 6 assists, 5 boards for Newbill, but he, played 37 minutes, so he's going to accumulate some numbers. But I thought, Yogi did defend him for a while, did a good job on him. And Yogi himself had a decent game. Only the 7 points, but 6 assists, the 3 boards, only had a couple of turnovers tonight. Didn't get to the free throw line, which is a little bit disappointing. But, I decided to go look at Yogi's game log because he only attempted tonight 8 field goal attempts. And when you look at Indiana's last 5 games, which include 2 losses and 3 victories, in the 3 victories, Penn State, Ohio State, and Nebraska, Yogi has taken 8, 8, and 7 shots. In the 2 losses, Michigan State and Georgetown, Yogi's taken 16 and 15 shots. And a little bit of a small sample size to kind of draw any conclusions from, and obviously the two games where he took a lot of shots were by far the two best opponents. Kind of seeing that this team seems to operate better anyway when Yogi's forcing things a little bit less on offense and taking more of a leadership role on the defensive end and kind of facilitating more on offense. And Andy, I want to get your thoughts on this because I feel like this is a conversation we've been having since Yogi was a freshman. And so I'm curious what you think of his role, kind of his overall value. I mean, have you reached kind of the conclusion I have right now that he's pretty severely underrated because we came to look at him for his offensive contributions last year and his primary contributions this year coming on the other end of the floor?
Yeah, I wondered. I saw later this evening that you had tweeted me that during the day about him and Russell and Trimble, and I wasn't sure what precipitated it. So now at least I know the answer to that. I mean, I think for this team, I don't know that you would make an argument to take one of those guys because what this team needs, at least at this point, is a guy that has Yogi's skill set that can, play on or off the ball. I think defensively, if nothing else, as much as this team struggles on defense, I think you need a guy, albeit one who's undersized by most standards, to be able to guard a guy like Newbill, who he really struggled with at times, but overall did a pretty good job given the amount of size that he was giving up in that matchup. So I think we've seen his value on the defensive end there, and had 6 assists tonight. I look back, I was kind of looking back at the same game log you were there. He had 6 assists tonight in the win, 8 assists in the Nebraska win, only 2 against Ohio State, but I think he's trying to strike that balance. I still think that's a struggle because he's obviously shown that he's a guy who can score and make shots. But the reality is, in the last few games, he has struggled with his outside shot. In the last really Big Ten play of those 4 games, he's 6 of 26, I think, if I'm doing the quick math here from 3. So, I think that's kind of a concern. I know I tweeted out early in the game that he hit one early and it was like, all right, this would be great to see him get going. And not that you need a night when he goes out and scores 30, but just where you see him more consistently, hitting some of those shots. So, by the same token, after last year, he's the focal point of everybody else's scouting report as well. So in the same way that he's often, asked to guard, the other team's best player, they're throwing everything they've got at him. And, I think he's definitely trusting guys on this team maybe more than he did last year when it was evident that he had to be the guy that scored. You can see he's not afraid to kick it out to, Johnson or Hartman and Troy to make plays and Blackman. So I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. I think the thing that concerns me most is the shooting. It's not necessarily the point totals. I guess if I had to sum it up, he's still doing a lot for this team, and I think to answer the question of who would you take out of those 3 guys? I think for IU's team, it's him. If you put me in a different situation, maybe I would pick somebody else, but I think he brings a lot of the things to the table that this team needs, certainly more than a D'Angelo Russell would. Trimble's a little bit more of at least a similar conversation where, this team doesn't necessarily need a guy like Russell who, really wants to get his own shot and things like that. Part of what Yogi does that's so valuable is his ability to facilitate.
What would it be like if D'Angelo Russell and James Blackman Jr. were on the same offense?
Unclear. I don't know what the defense. I don't know that the defense might be the scarier part of that trade-off too.
Be like when Carmelo Anthony. It would be like when Carmelo Anthony and Allen Iverson were on the same Denver Nuggets team. Everybody else was like, "Hey, we play basketball too. We can shoot sometimes, guys."
All right, Ryan, you had a hot sports opinion on Yogi.
Yeah, I mean, I still think Yogi's the MVP of this team, and it may not show up in the numbers every week, but I just think that he's the engine that makes everything go. And those games you cited where he took more shots against Michigan State and Georgetown, you got to remember in those games nobody else was hitting anything, and so it was sort of like against Michigan State it was just time to start gunning. I mean, and try and make something happen. Against Georgetown, he was hitting shots and a couple other guys weren't. So I think that he was more pressed into action in those games, whereas when the offense is flowing and everybody's contributing, I mean, let's face it, this team is better when a lot of guys are contributing. Tonight you had Johnson, Troy Williams. I mean, we haven't even really talked about Troy, and he was the Big Ten Network's player of the game, and so you get Johnson and Troy and Stan Robinson, and even Blackman was in double figures tonight and didn't really have a great game, but still was scoring points. I mean, that's what makes this team more difficult to play. If it's Yogi doing what he did against Michigan every game, Michigan last year at home every game, I mean, yeah, that's wonderful, but it doesn't really help the rest of the team because he's going to run into somebody who can guard him at some point, and this team is better when everybody's contributing. So I still think he's the MVP. I still think I bet the rest of the team, the players on the team, would say that as well, just for what he offers on both ends of the floor and his ability to just kind of get everybody involved and move things around and keep the offense moving. And I thought tonight, actually, it's been a criticism all year, and I've had it too, is that at times the offense does stand still when it's clear that ball movement is what makes this team go and score points. And I thought tonight they moved the ball well. It just they missed some open shots that could have really stretched the lead out, and they really had nothing inside. So, and Yogi's the reason that happens. I mean, when he goes off the floor, it's a different team.
So let's talk about Troy real quick, because I was thinking about this because I remember early in the season I mentioned it on a couple episodes of the show, and I wrote an article about how, for Troy to really be good, he needed to understand what he does well when he's playing well, which early in the season was not doing as much dribbling, as much penetrating, as much creating, and letting other guys create for him. Which I look back on that now and I think, what an idiot I was. I mean, granted, I was just trying to analyze what I was seeing, but I mean, I'm not sure that we have fully discussed, appreciated how big a shift has occurred with this offense in the last, I don't know, maybe I guess since the Butler game. Was that really Troy's coming out party? Was the Butler game? I mean, they talked in Canada about Troy playing more point guard, and everybody was kind of like, what? After watching him as a freshman. And I know that the suspension at the start of the year kind of stunted that plan early on. It took him a little while to get going. But, I mean, you guys disagree with me if I'm wrong, but I really feel like the best offense for us right now is when Troy gets it and goes. And he's either creating something for himself. He is so much better at effectively using the dribble to advance toward the basket and get himself in a position to get a good shot up on the rim, which I can't believe I'm saying that because it seems absurd from 6 weeks ago. But he's so much better at it, and he's getting better at creating for other guys. Now, he's not perfect, and he still throws up the wild shots, and he turns the ball over. But he's certainly improving, and I feel like with our poor shooting and just some of the other lulls we have, that's been our most consistent source of offense. And when he's as locked in as he was, during that 4 or 5 minute stretch I talked about during the banner moment, it makes this team really good, really effective. I mean, he's a true superstar. Guys around him. And he's not quite consistent for every even game when he does on this. I mean, you mentioned he was Big Ten Network's player of the game. We haven't talked about him that much. So let's maybe take a step back real quick and fully appreciate the evolution of his game because it's really changed what this team does on offense.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not exactly keen on having Troy run some point or initiate the offense yet, but he's getting there. I mean, you're seeing him take the ball with confidence in his dribble. I think that's the biggest thing. I think he was too tentative with his dribble early in the season when he clearly has the skill to do some things off the dribble, but he was just more comfortable catching it and dunking it or some other, getting it underneath on the baseline and putting it away and everything. But I think that what you're starting to see is him have the confidence to go in amongst more than just one person and not feel like he's automatically going to lose the ball like we've seen in the last few years, like we saw with Victor when he was still developing his dribble. He's not there yet. I mean, he's got to become a better passer because when that drive isn't there and people know you're going to do it and they start cutting you off with multiple defenders, you've got to be able to find the open guy, and he's not there yet. He's getting there, and he's made a couple nice passes, but he has to have that kind of confidence, the same kind of confidence he has when he goes up for a dunk. He's got to have that with his ball handling and with his passing. When he does that, he will be a complete offensive player. For the most part, he's got to develop a jump shot, but that's just a long way away. So, but as far as for this offense, we need him to do those three things: be able to finish, be able to drive with confidence, and be able to pass with confidence. If he does that, Indiana is a very dangerous team offensively, particularly when they're hitting shots. And I'm assuming at some point the shooting slump is going to end.
Yeah, I mean, the shooting has just kind of disappeared. Now, Indiana did make 9 threes tonight, so it was a little bit better, 9 of 21 42% or 43%, buoyed, of course, by Robert Johnson's 4 for 6. But yeah, you got to think that Yogi and James Blackman, who are a combined 3 for 11 tonight from downtown, are going to get it going at some point. Andy, any thoughts on Troy and just kind of his evolution and what he means to IU right now?
No, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with both of you. I think thought of him, running the point a lot scares me a little. But you do see plays like, the one he made to get Hartman that big 3 at the end. I mean, that was just him being able to create. And, especially when he can get the ball off the glass and start going the other way, because it really, his advantage is going to come by being able to blow by people when they're not set up. I think at a half-court set, you have a harder time doing that because people are just going to back off of him and dare him to make a jump shot until, as Ryan said, he gets better in that part of his game. So I definitely think from a transition standpoint, he's definitely not a guy that I know there were times last year where as soon as he got the ball on the open floor, everybody's kind of like covering their face and worried about what's going to happen. I definitely don't have those kinds of give the ball to somebody else type moments as we did last year. So I think he's definitely improved a lot. You can just see just comfort level in terms of just ball handling, like simple things. There was a play in the first half where he tried to save a pass and he just tapped it behind his back, and it ended up being, he was out of bounds. But there's just something to be said with how much more comfortable he is with the ball and just a better feel for what he's trying to do with it and some of those more subtle movements and being able to handle things that way. So I think he's only going to get better. We look at I was looking over his game log as well. I mean, over the course of the season, he's had, outside of that Michigan State game, which we'll just throw out pretty much all around, he's only had one game where he wasn't in double figures, and at least since Big Ten play started kind of the end of the non-conference season, pretty consistently getting 13, 15 a game. So that was what he did tonight, was efficient 12 shots, and the turnovers, he didn't have any until the second half, until Jeff Rabjohns tweeted something out, and then immediately after he turned the ball over, and then you could tell that he was just bombarded with people saying, "Why did you jinx it? Why did you say something?" So,
way to go,
Rabjohns.
Sure
that may or may not be the last time he tweets anything positive like that, but I thought for the most part in the game he was really good, and I thought the one thing we talked about with him in the Ohio State game, and just some of the energy comments at the beginning of the game, I thought he really brought a lot of energy early on, helped the team get out to the early lead, which later went away pretty quickly. But we talked a bit on Saturday about how important it was for him to be able to set the tone, and I thought he did a good job of that to start out and played well throughout.
Yeah, I got to say, it's almost like Troy is growing into his size or something, or just becoming more coordinated, and sometimes when guys have huge growth spurts, it takes them a while, I know that from experience, to become coordinated and sort of get it together, and he just seems like he's more confident in all his movements, and he just, he's not some wild mix of arms and legs. He's actually, way more compact in his movements and has a purpose with him, it seems like. And I think that's contributing a lot. And maybe it's the strength program, I don't know, but he just seems to be more confident in all of his movements. And like Andy said, with that little behind the back, tap and stuff like that. I mean, you would not have seen that last year. He'd have tried that, but he'd have thrown it in the fourth row. So he's definitely a different guy all around.
Yeah, and now it's the shot. And what's ironic, I guess, is that at the end of last year, the shot is what actually started to come on. If you remember, he started making threes in the last few Big Ten games last year, and we're thinking, okay, here's the jump shot starting to come on. And in his evolution, I guess I kind of would have thought that the jump shot would come before this confident, assertive playmaking that we're seeing right now. But hey, whatever, we'll take it because again, we've talked about the importance of getting in. I think 3 different IU writers wrote about the whole good Troy, bad Troy thing last week. And it's true, when you get the good Troy like tonight, 15 points, 4 boards, and assertiveness at key times when Indiana needs to make a run, it makes this team pretty good, and it makes this team tough to beat, as it was tonight. So we're going to talk about something in a second that's going to terrify everybody, and it's the reason why you need to appreciate this win, not be upset about it, not worry about it, just appreciate 3-1. I'll tell you why in a minute. But first, a pop quiz. It's becoming a little bit of a tradition here. Ryan, who led IU in plus-minus tonight?
Ryan Burton.
No, but good guess. That's what I wanted to get to. Ryan Burton was actually second. He was plus 10 in 5 minutes. 15. Burton. We need a
You
segment
cut
on
out a
Ryan
little.
Burton.
You cut out a
Oh,
little, Jared. What'd you say about Colin Hartman?
yeah, Colin Hartman was actually number one. He was his plus minus was 15, so he was first on the team. I apologize if I have been cutting out. You know, the Wi-Fi here at the Days Inn in Scottsdale is perhaps not quite as good as it is at home in Dallas. So if I am cutting out, that is why. But you know, just kind of looking here through some of the comments from the players, it looks like Stan and Ryan Burton. Not sure if anybody else was there in the post-game press conference, and Robert Johnson. But Stan basically said, hey, without Ryan Burton, you know, who knows what happens in this game? I don't even know if we win. And, you know, look, last year against Penn State, at Penn State, Jeff Howard came in, had 4 points, like 3 offensive rebounds, was really key. Sometimes you need performances like this in little short spurts of 5 minutes because college sports are such an emotional game, especially college basketball. So, real quick, let's have a little around the horn Ryan Burton appreciation here before we move into looking ahead. And, Ryan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I watched Burton play at Bedford when I was working in Bloomington, and he's a solid all-around player. He always has been. He can play, and he's not your average walk-on. I mean, he's a guy who went to college to play basketball and transferred back to Indiana because he wanted to be close to home. And you know, the guy can play. I mean, he's an energy guy and stuff like that. With Hunter down, I mean, it makes sense that he's going to get some front court minutes. And, you know, he's an energy guy, and we've seen guys like that have success here, you know, from Eric Sir to whoever. Jeff Howard had some nice stretches. I mean, you know, you don't want to see him in there for 15 minutes a game, but he's a guy who came in off the bench. Penn State probably didn't even have a page on him in their or even a paragraph on him in their scouting report. And he energized the crowd, energized the game, and you saw Tom Crean when he pulled him out, you know, appreciating him and talking to him for a minute and congratulating him basically. And you know, that's the way we all feel. I mean, it's great to see an Indiana guy come in and tear it up for the Hoosiers. It was awesome. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, some of the quotes, you know, from the post game from Pat Chambers look like exactly what Ryan said. Didn't have a page on him in the scouting report, and really said he just came in, you know, was active, defended, rebounded, did what he was supposed to do. And I think, you know, we talked about that so many times with guys this year. That's one of the things that we've, you know, went on and on about Hartman, where you know what you're going to get. He's always in the right place, doing the right things, understands his role. I mean, that was exactly what you saw with Burton tonight. And in the way that we said maybe Hartman and Holt at times tonight were trying to do too much to make up for, you know, Hunter being out, it definitely felt like, you know, Burton just went in, did exactly what he was asked to do, and provided things that other guys just simply hadn't done. I mean, he had, you know, coming into that point, he came in the game, the team had 1 offensive rebound through probably about 30 minutes, if I had to, you know, kind of guess when he came in. And then, you know, from there, you know, he gets 3 offensive rebounds in 5 minutes. And that's, you know, it's not all about effort, but it's a lot about effort. You know, there's certain, you know, positioning things like that that come into play. But, you know, at that point, I think it was really trying to get guys to set the tone from an effort standpoint. And so the same things that we saw from, you know, Hartman and Zaislov come in against Ohio State, felt like he did. He played that role tonight. And, you know, as much as we've talked about how this team goes as the bench goes for a while, that now becomes a little bit more of a dicey proposition when you think about, you know, at least one of those bench guys is getting into the starting lineup now. So tonight it was Hartman. Have to think it probably stays that way based on, you know, how Holt played tonight. And so you've got to find other guys that can step up, because really outside of, you know, Stan tonight had 12 points off the bench. The rest of the bench had 3 points. Burton came in, played really well in his short stint with those 3 rebounds and an assist. So you're going to have to find other guys that can pick up the bench a bit, because they're going to lose some of the production that's been important in some of the big wins this season, just by virtue of Perea being out and having to shuffle other guys into the starting lineup.
Yeah, and I want to address something here real quick. You know, with Hunter going out, and you guys feel free to jump in here if you want to on this. With Hunter going out, a lot of people were saying, okay, is this when Jeremy April steps in? Is this when Tim Priller gets time? And frankly, I feel like if you're asking that, you're not paying close enough attention, because number one, Tim Priller is not really a post guy. You know, he's a guy that Indiana really got from high school. He's tall, but it's really because he can make 3-pointers. He's a guy who in high school averaged a game that tall. So that kind of tells you that he's not that aggressive of an inside player. And this is not meant as a slight at Tim Priller. He's just not a post guy, and he is not going to be filling in for Hunter Perea's minutes. And even more than that, Jeremiah April, who I know has tantalized us with a turnaround jump shot and a few other singular moves that he's had. But on his radio show Monday night, just this week, before the Hunter Purell news broke, Tom Crean was saying Jeremiah April has a long way to go. He needs to work harder. Basically called him out for not working hard enough. And this again, I know he's 6'11", 7 feet. He's tall and he looks good in a uniform. He's not a guy, again, who was really highly recruited that was on anybody's radar, even to the Emmett Holt level. And Emmett Holt wasn't a highly recruited guy. So to think that those two guys are just going to step in, I think was a little unrealistic. And it places unrealistic expectations on both them because they shouldn't be playing as freshmen. They're developmental players. And on Tom Crean, where it looks like, hey, why isn't he giving this 7-footer minutes? And Ryan, I know you tweeted out from the Assembly Call account at one point tonight, you got to trust the coaches. They know what they're doing. And certainly in cases like this, I think, Spill. And so I think, I don't want to make anybody feel bad when I say that you haven't been paying attention if you're asking those questions, but I just think at this point in the season, let's be realistic about Jeremiah April especially, that he's probably not going to play a big role on this team for many, many reasons, and it's probably the right move, by all parties. Any thoughts there before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I'll jump in. I know Ryan wants to as well. Crimson Quarry, I thought, put it well during the game. At one point, tweeted out, "Being tall does not immediately make you a serviceable player." So I think that's probably good advice to hang on to and think about with this. I mean, for as much as people want to get upset about, and I'm clearly not the greatest Crean supporter out there, but at the point when he said, everybody wants to get on him and say, well, then you shouldn't have recruited the guy if you're saying he needs to work harder. I mean, at this point, that's kind of water under the bridge. It really doesn't matter. Whatever you think of Crean and whether he should or shouldn't have signed April and whether he'll be, anything in the future, it really doesn't matter. What he has to do is give this team the best chance to win right now. And in his estimation, that isn't by playing Jeremiah April. And we haven't seen him at all other than a few minutes against Louisville against good competition. And if that small sample size is any indication, he's definitely not ready. And so you got to move forward with who you have. And I think, the one thing, it looked like Crean alluded to this after the game, and I tweeted something out to a similar effect during the game, which frightens me a little bit that I'm, A, defending Crean in this scenario, and B, making similar comments to him. This is when the show starts to come off the rails at this point. But I think the area where they're going to miss Hunter the most is, for as much as we've all, criticized him and questioned his development and kind of ridden the roller coaster that's been his performance over the course of the season, what he does provide is at least the threat of somebody blocking shots in the middle. And we saw in that Nebraska game ability to rebound, and he doesn't show that every game, and that's fine. But understand that really outside of Holt, who's shown some shot blocking ability, he's still undersized, as long wingspan, things like that. He's shown some. Troy can block shots, but they're more coming off the ball and on help defense type situations. So, there's nothing at this point to deter opponents from, pounding it inside. And I tweeted this after the game. Penn State shot 65% on 2-pointers. Thank God they shot 24 threes for reasons known only to them, because this game could have gone a different way. There was no real answer, even for mid-level post players inside, and there just isn't that threat there. Nobody's afraid to go in there and do that, and so I think that magnifies to a certain extent IU's struggles with on-ball defense and things like that on the perimeter. So I think that's one of the areas where they're going to miss him maybe more than people initially thought. And while everybody looks and says, "Oh, this roster," that really hurts. I think it's easy to say, "Oh, Holtz played good. I'm not sure Purell should have been starting anyway. What's the big deal?" Well, the big deal is, you're missing a guy who at least is a threat to opposing offenses to come in and block some shots and grab some rebounds. And so I think it may take some time to figure out how to deal with that. And obviously it was a relatively short turnaround between the injury yesterday and today, playing the game. But guys are going to have to step up and play better, and I think that's important. But I think it's also, we can't lose sight of what Purell was bringing, even if it wasn't always tangible on the court, what he was really doing, and just say, well, throw anybody that's tall out there, because Again, at this point in this team, anybody tall that was showing anything in practice would be playing at this point. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, I think people just being like, well, why wasn't April playing in the preseason, in the non-conference? He should have been getting 5 to 10 minutes a game. It's like, he's a project. He was recruited as a project, and you know what? If in 3 years we have a guy who could be a sixth man at 6'11" and come off the bench and actually bang in the Big Ten, awesome. We'll look back on that and be like, awesome. If not, whatever. It's a 6'11" guy you get to have in practice every day. But I mean, to expect him to come in and play big minutes as a freshman when nobody was recruiting, I think he has some tangible skills. I do, and I think that there's some nice stuff there to develop. But it's going to take time. And people saying that Tim Priller, well, he played a little in the preseason, he should be thrown into the post. Are you kidding me? The guy is softer than a wet ham sandwich. He's not going to stand up in the Big Ten against anybody, even if it's a weak front court like Penn State. I mean, he's a perimeter guy who stands out and takes shots. He is not a post player or a replacement. So, I mean, people need to get realistic. Just because you're on an IU roster doesn't mean you're an all-world guy right now who can step in and dominate people. So, you need to be realistic, and you also need to realize that the coaches are in every single practice, are watching film of every single practice, and then are watching film of games and the upcoming teams they play. They know who needs to be on the floor. It may not always work out right, but they know who needs to be on the floor.
I really think there's some IU fans that just have an animated GIF of that Jeremiah April turnaround jump shot against Mississippi Valley State, and they just play it over and over again, dreaming of what could be.
And one of them is named Jerod Morris.
I have mentioned it an inordinate amount of times. I'm secretly pining for more of it. There was a quote. Yeah, Tom Crean was channeling his inner Charlie Sheen here. This is Sam Bashusin quoting him saying, "There's not awards for pretty, there's awards for winning." Which, hey, Tom Crean apparently not aware of Miss Universe and Miss USA contests, but otherwise in a basketball context, he is correct. And again, that's why I think, take some joy in the win. Remember, let's enjoy the wins, let's enjoy the positive moments, because, unfortunately with this program over the last 7 years, sometimes the rug gets pulled out from under your feet when you least expect it. So enjoy. But all joking aside, I mean that. Again, we've said this, and told you, every single person takes it. So that's what we have in the bank. And I think especially this year, when it's going to be such a crazy season, it's already been such a crazy season, just get wins in the bank, put them in the bank and move forward. Now Indiana needs 7 more victories, and we have how many more games to get 7 victories to get to a 20-win season? And I would have to think that something pretty remarkable would have to happen for Indiana to not be feeling pretty good about their tournament chances at 20 wins going into the Big Ten tournament. Okay, now with that said, let's all get terrified a little bit, because despite the 3-1 start, the next 4 games are not going to be easy. There's at Illinois, and obviously that looked a little bit better when Hunter was playing without Revonte Rice, but now they're without Revonte Rice or without Hunter Perea. Then it's home against Maryland, who has been obviously very good this year. Then it's at Ohio State, and then at Purdue. And Purdue has not been great this year, but they do have the one thing that Indiana is really going to struggle to handle, which is 2 big post guys. Play well against Indiana, so don't think we're going to Purdue pretty and end up doing our picks for all of these games. If you told me right now that Indiana went 0-4 in these games, I would not be shocked. And I don't mean that. And that's still saying that I think they're going to win 20 games. I just think these are 4 really tough games. Now, I think they'll find a way to win 1, maybe 2 of them, because I think there's enough offensive firepower there. But especially without Hunter, you look at those 4 games, and those are looking pretty tough. So, Andy, let's talk specifically about this Illinois game. They're without Rice, we're without Hunter. I think their loss is a little bigger than ours. But, at Illinois has been a pretty tough place. I mean, we can go up there, play well, and lose a game because we forget to guard a guy on an inbounds, and that's when we play well up there. So, what needs to happen for Indiana to and Illinois is not a very good offensive team this year. So if we can shoot well, that should certainly help us. But what needs to happen for us to go in there and get a win?
Yeah, I think I started to feel a little bit better about it when I saw Rice was out. He's a guy who's been a pretty good scorer for them in both the matchups last year, and so they do that, and then they turn around and beat Maryland their first game without him, which really makes you wonder. And then they played one of the most unwatchable basketball games I've ever seen against Nebraska on Sunday night. So kind of a mixed bag what we've seen from them in the small sample size without him. I think if IU can somehow force them into a mix similar to what we saw from Penn State tonight, where they get them to shoot a lot of threes. I mean, they shot against Nebraska, they shot 29 threes, only 26 twos in a game that was relatively close for the majority of the game. And so I think that hopefully is the formula there. They don't have Nana Egwu's there. He's a big guy. They've got a couple other, Maverick Morgan is back, but other than that, they don't have a ton of size, which plays a little bit in IU's favor. And I think the best thing they can do is, kind of dupe Aaron Cosby and Ahmad Starks into firing threes, because those are a couple of guys who have transferred from other major college programs, set out last year and are playing now. Neither one of those guys has shot the ball very well from three, so I think you can try to get them to take those kinds of shots and have them try to carry the offense, which is kind of what happened against Nebraska, at least in the parts that I watched. So I think there's work that can be done there. Their offense is not terrible, but not great. They have been pretty good defensively. I think Egwu is a decent part of that, a good rim protector in there. I think being able to try to find a way to get him in foul trouble, which will likely be challenging given who IU is rolling out there in the front court, but may also be a case where this is one of those things I mentioned before, where can Hartman draw him away from the basket a little bit. There's really there's not a scenario where you could see them trying to put him on Troy Williams. So feels like at that point if anybody's playing a true center power forward type guy, they're not going to match them up with Troy because they're likely not going to be able to guard him. So that's where Hartman can be really important in that role and pulling those guys away from the basket. So I think that's something to look for and hopefully get some of those guys to take some ill-advised shots. I think they've been able to, that's something they've at least shown some propensity to do of late. And again, you get into a scenario where guys are trying to make up for somebody being out. The same things that we said about Hartman and Holt tonight, trying to make up for Perea. You've got other guys there trying to do the same thing with Rice out. And the reality is they're sitting at 1-3 in the Big Ten, and they play at Northwestern tomorrow. Certainly a game, maybe they win, maybe they lose. Certainly if they come in at 1-4, there all of a sudden is quite a bit of pressure on them. And in the same way that I think we worried that IU could be facing a lot of pressure during this stretch of games by getting off to a bad start, it starts to feel like a good opportunity for IU to pick up another road win, which is going to be so critical in the Big Ten. So it definitely will be interesting. I think they've got to try to find a way to keep Egwu off the glass, although at least numbers-wise right now, offensive rebounding is not an area that Illinois has excelled in. Their biggest thing has been, they have one of the lowest turnover percentages anywhere. So we've seen the IU's defense probably not going to force a ton either. So if you're not going to give them empty possessions, you got to try to find ways to make them take the shots that you want them to take, and more than likely that's three-pointers from some of the guys that we've mentioned before.
All right, now it's time to go on record with your pick. Do the Hoosiers go into Champaign and get the victory?
I'll take IU in this one, which is probably a kiss of death, but
Whoa!
I know you didn't see that. Did not see that coming. I know. No more gloom and doom for me. Let me tell you. Now I just think some of the things I said before. I think Illinois, you can get those guys, and we've seen this sometimes earlier in the year. If IU can try to find a way to get the game at its pace, knock down a couple threes. You've seen other teams that may not be the best at three-point shooting. So Louisville, as an example, have guys that kind of pull up and take some threes and try to get into that. And I think that's a way that you might be able to get Cosby and Starks to take some of those shots that you want. And so I'm being optimistic. Now, if they lose, I'm clearly going to pick IU to lose like the next 5 games, just out of to try to balance things out. But for now, I think they've got a few days to try to figure out what they need to do different offensively. They got a nice layoff here with not playing till Sunday to work some things out, and I think some of the pressure that comes in with Illinois there is important. And so seeing IU win a couple of these games that you didn't think they would win over the course of the season, and I think this might be one that they're able to steal on the road. Certainly of the these next 3 out of the next 4 on the road, I think this one is probably the most winnable based on personnel and who I think each team's going to have at this point.
Ryan, your pick.
I think Indiana's going to win. I will pick Indiana. I think that the key thing for Indiana is IU is now 3-1 in the Big Ten and has not come close to playing its best basketball. I mean, these 3 wins have not been amazing. There have been stretches of good play, but they've played better in other games this year. You look at the Pittsburgh game, you look at Butler, I thought they played better. So stretches in the Georgetown game, I thought they played better than they have in the Big Ten. So it's interesting that this team has started off this way, and it's not like they're, lit on fire and just nailing threes or bombing away. They've found ways to win, and I think against Illinois, for some reason, I get the feeling we're gonna have a bounce back shooting game. I don't know why, because that has not happened in Big Ten play yet. But I think this is a bounce back offensively, and I think they're going to play well.
Wow, I thought I was going to have to, kind of bring things up on a positive note here with both you guys picking against us, but I underestimated you both, and I apologize for that. I'm picking Indiana. I agree that we're due for a good shooting night. And here's a couple numbers. Andy alluded to this earlier with the turnovers. Illinois, this is what, the 2 things they do the best, kind of comparison to other teams. They only turn it over on 15% of their possessions. And we know that Indiana basically doesn't turn anybody over at all. Indiana is 328 in the country in forcing turnovers, and that number by Illinois is 4th in the country. But Indiana's won in plenty of games not turning people over, so that's okay. And here's the other thing, is Illinois is 3rd in the country making free throws at 78.3%. Only 2 teams in the country play better free throw defense than Indiana, as we are holding opponents to 59.8% shooting from the free throw line. So clearly we're closing out well on free throw shooters, and I think that's going to help us in this game. Okay, that last part was a little ridiculous. But I am picking Indiana because simply I think we're the better team. I think of the 2 guys who are missing, they are hurt more by the Ravonte Rice loss than we are by the Hunter loss, although I think people are underestimating how big the Hunter loss is for all the reasons that Andy alluded to. But I'm starting to gain confidence in this team and in this team's ability to win those close, nasty, grinded-out games, and it feels like the games at Illinois are always those close, nasty, grinded-out type games. And so as long as we guard inbounds guys late with the game on the line and don't just let them run wide open for layups, I think we can win this game. Sorry, flashback to it.
I love Cody Zeller, but I will always hold that against him.
Yeah, he's Cody Zeller, so we'll give him a mulligan. But that was that was quite the brain fart right there. All right, so we have some more breaking Twitter news, and Andy Bottoms, I'd like to bring you in on this, and we'll use this to lead us into our final thoughts. But rumors and rants.
I think we just lost.
Well, Jerod, now.
Now, hang on. We completely lost you. So whatever slanderous maneuver you were trying to pull on Ryan there was lost.
Completely missed everything you said.
Days in Scottsdale, baby. Okay, so Ryan on Twitter, responding to Brian Butera, says, quote, "I think given all the circumstances surrounding this team, it's Crean's best coaching job by far." Now, true or false, is this the 7th straight year that Ryan has tweeted that?
That is 100% false and slanderous.
But possibly true.
That was outstanding. Well worth having to do a second time. Thanks for nothing, Days in, but that was well worth it at least.
Okay, so with that said, we'll go to Ryan first for final thoughts so that he can defend himself. Unless he just storms off.
Last year was a disaster, all right?
But I feel like at some point you were saying Crean was doing a great job.
Well, no, just not a great job. I just think at some point, you can only do so much as a coach. I do believe that. I think your players suck. You're just going to, wander through the season. But as far as tonight, I thought it was a good win. I mean, it wasn't pretty, but like the coach said, they don't give points for that. I thought it was a good win, and obviously coming on the heels of the bad news about Hunter and the heels of a huge win against Ohio State, I think that getting the win was the key thing. I don't care how it looked, get the win. We'll work on pretty later. And hopefully, they have it's good for the team that they have a layoff until Sunday. They don't have to play Saturday. They get that extra day to work on whatever they're going to work on and come up with something to deal with the lack of size. And they better come up with something, because those next couple games after Illinois, they're going to need a plan. And so, hey, it's a win over a team that's struggling. And those are always dangerous, especially when Penn State comes to Assembly Hall, because apparently they love it there. So, big win for Indiana, and hey, tied for first place in the conference. Can't go wrong there.
That's right. Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo some of the same things. I mean, I think if somebody had said at the beginning of the season you're going to be 3-1 through the first 4 games of the Big Ten, no matter how you get there, and as frustrating as the loss to Michigan State was, more in the way than they lost and not the fact that they lost, I think any of us would have taken that. I think we could just as easily have seen a 1-3 start. So in that regard, I think you got to, enjoy the win from that perspective. I think obviously the loss of Perea really just exaggerates some of the question marks that there already were about the team, and that's not going to go away from this game, and it's not going to go away against Illinois, and it's certainly not going to go away against some of the other teams that they played. I think the encouraging part for me is that it hasn't always been the same guy, but it seems like more often than not at points this season, guys have stepped up when they needed them. So while I thought when Stan Robinson came in, and puts his head down and goes to the basket, it's like, oh, here we go again. But, he managed to make some really good plays, made some nice moves in the post, and for a guy that came in shooting horrendously from the free throw line, was 6 of 6. So between him and Burton, you saw guys step up, and I think that was something that we didn't see last year. It was, well, let's just wait around and see if Yogi can make some shots and get us back in the game and things like that. I think more often than not, that felt like the approach. So the encouraging thing for me through these first 4 games of the Big Ten, and really through the first however many games into the season we are, is that we've seen different guys be able to do that and pick each other up when they're not playing well. And hopefully the time comes pretty soon, and hopefully as soon as Sunday, when the guys who everybody would have pegged as the top scorers on the team, like Yogi and Blackman, get hot from three-point range and play really well, and pick up some of their teammates who might not have as good a game. So, from my standpoint, I think good as you could expect to be at this point through the conference season, and while things over the course of the year may not have gone as we thought they would, both for the good and for the bad, I think you kind of enjoy the win, because, as we've said after some of the losses and probably after some of the wins, this doesn't make me feel any differently about what this team's good at and bad at, and who can be a contributing player and who can't be. It just is part of that roller coaster. So for now, we managed to hang on by the skin of our teeth, and we'll see what happens on Sunday against Illinois. But I think being able to get out to a 4-1 start with a couple of road wins in your pocket would be pretty huge. So huge opportunity for the team, and I think a 5-day layoff here is going to be a really good thing as they try to figure out what they want to do both offensively and defensively without Perea. Now it looks like Jerod's camera froze, or your video froze. It looked like you were really, like your eyes were closed, like you were really thinking about what you were gonna say. So I didn't know if I should interrupt some kind of zen-like moment that you were having or not.
This show is a lot like this IU-Penn State game.
Not tranquil, so I understand that.
This show is a lot like the game. Things were going very well, but it's a real rocky start here. So the day's end's about to put up a 3-pointer at the end of the show that's going to be waved off. All right, look, I'll try and keep this really quick, but there is a point that I want to make. If I cut out, I apologize, and I'll put it in a blog post. But, we entered this season lamenting the fact that we didn't have Noah Vonleh and Luke Fisher. And people still talk about it, and I get it, because, you think about what if, and it's tantalizing. But now, midway through the Big Ten season, we're just wishing that we had Devin Davis and Hunter Perea. Think about that. And obviously we don't know if Devin's coming back and Hunter's going to be out indefinitely, probably for 4 weeks. And yet somehow this team, again, is 13-4, 3-1 in the conference. So, again, I feel like every time around this point in the season, it's kind of that call to, enjoy the positives, enjoy the wins. Don't just brush them off as, oh, we should have won by more, we should have done this. We won, we're 3-1, we're 13-4. Someone tweeted that we're not a Final Four contender. No, we're probably not a Final Four contender, but that doesn't mean that all is lost. That doesn't mean that this team isn't worth your support or getting excited about. And this team is more fun than last year's team and already more successful and already proving that they can tough it out and grind out tough games more than last year's team did. So, when you look at what this team has done with everything that faced them at the start of the year, the challenges they're facing now in the season, the last challenge they need is a fan base being unnecessarily critical and that doesn't at least laud them and get excited when they win a game. The goal is to win games. We did that tonight. We should be excited about it. And as we move through the rest of the Big Ten season, that's the mindset to have. Of course, we want the team to get better. We want them to start playing better as the season goes along. But the goal is to win games. And the team did that tonight. They're 13-4, 3-1, and there's a lot to be excited about. And I think we should all be excited. And even though this next stretch of games is going to be tough, keep that excitement, keep that positivity. Because if we can just weather this storm of the next 3 or 4 games, I think we've got some good times. And we were saying the very same thing, saying, hey, if we can just be 1-3, just win one of these, maybe 2, we'll be sitting pretty. And guess what? We're 3-1. So this team has been exceeding our expectations all year. Why should we think they won't do it over these next 4 games? I'll just leave it with that question, leave it hanging, and let's get out of here before the day's end cuts out my audio any more than that. Thank you all very much for watching. assemblycall.com/subscribe. Make sure you get on the email list, get our post-game day after analysis. And with that said, we will be here Sunday after the IU-Illinois game for another live episode of the Assembly Call. All right, everybody, have a good night. We will talk to you on Sunday.